Madam President, I rise to celebrate the people of New Jersey, many of whom lost everything in Superstorm Sandy, but who came through one of the most devastating storms in our state's history, battered but not broken. The storm struck New Jersey with extraordinary force. It was the entry point of Superstorm Sandy. And the surge came quickly, destroying whole communities, taking homes from their foundations, changing the topography of the coastline, devastating some of the most densely populated communities in the country, taking lives and taking property, leaving New Jerseyans without power but not powerless, without the personal possessions accumulated over a lifetime, but with their families and their memories intact. Memories that are the foundation upon which New Jerseyans are recovering and rebuilding their lives and their communities. With the help of FEMA and other federal agencies, the American Red Cross, countless volunteers from around the country, state and local officials working overtime to help, New Jersey will come back stronger and better, and we are more determined than ever to rebuild and restore our communities to where they were. The people of New Jersey withstood the unbridled power of nature, the power of nature strengthened by man-made climate change to create an unprecedented storm and unprecedented damage. And I want to share with my colleagues some of the photos showing the devastation and why New Jersey needs a strong federal partner if we hope to rebuild. As you can see, Sandy mixed all forms of transportation with a force we haven't seen in many years. This is a shipping container and a large pleasure boat tossed onto the Morgan Rail Bridge on the North Jersey coastline, along with tons of debris. The container from the shipping lines, the ship on a bridge that obviously was a rail bridge. You can see we've got a lot of work to do with scenes like this up and down the coast. In this photograph, you can see the kind of damage that our rail lines have suffered, heaved from the railroad beds and buckled. This, again, is along the North Jersey coastline, which had miles of track damage just like this and in need of millions of dollars in repair. In fact, 40% of the nation's transit riders from Washington to Boston had their service interrupted. Dozens and dozens of New Jersey transit locomotives and rail cars were damaged by flooding. And so today I'm proud to announce that we expedited $25 million in transportation funding to help ease that situation. But some commuters into New York, for example, from my home state of New Jersey, are still suffering 4-hour commutes, with rail service only about half of what it normally is, largely because there's still not enough power for all the trains. In the meantime, New Jersey has added subsidized ferry service to make up the difference, with the Department of Transportation providing over 300, the Federal Department of Transportation providing over 300 buses to help serve those new ferry lines, including one out of Liberty State Park. Here's another photograph of the extraordinary power that Sandy's surge lifted boats onto the rail bridge along the North Jersey coastline. Amazingly, through the hard work of New Jersey transit workers, this devastated rail line might be able to resume limited service by the end of this week. But this line, like many other commuter lines in New Jersey, will need much more extensive work to get service levels back to normal and to make more permanent repairs to ensure long-term reliability. But beyond the transportation damage, it's important to remember that some lost everything in the storm and some lost their lives. And our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families who lost loved ones to Superstorm Sandy. I toured some of the worst hit areas with President Obama and Governor Christie and spoke to New Jerseyans who suffered extraordinary loss and were hit the hardest. Now, some of these photos that I'm about to show now, I took myself. They may not be the best photographs, and I may not be the best photographer, but they show a small part of the overall destruction that my state has suffered. You can see this photograph from the Coast Guard plane I was abroad, some of the destruction on Sandy Hook, New Jersey. These homes are deeply under water, many of them rendered impossible to return to for a significant period of time. There are other homes I'll show you in which people just cannot return home to what was their home. This is a photograph of the flooding in the Mantolocan area north of Seaside Heights that submerged cars and cost millions of dollars of damage and thousands to be displaced from their homes. And this bridge actually collapsed at the end there, leaving this whole section difficult in terms of exit off the barrier islands. I took the next two photographs while touring northern New Jersey. I've shown most of the pictures from the shore area, which took the hardest hit because that was the entry point largely for Superstorm Sandy, but not everywhere was just along the shore. Here's an example of the type of flooding that took place in Hoboken, New Jersey. On the night of the storm, this flooding was just beginning, and it only got worse, so much so that it took the National Guard to rescue residents from their homes days after the storm. It filled the streets with overflow from combined sewer flows and from sewage plants. Gasoline was reeking in the air, a danger to the health and well-being of the residents, and it made the damage even worse than anyone had imagined possible. The next photograph I took is from Observer Highway. This is a major thoroughfare between two significant parts of the metropolitan area, between the city of Hoboken and the city of Jersey City, the second largest city in our state. I can't remember ever seeing the area so expansively underwater, and I hope to never see it again. And all of these cars were floating, some of them crashing into each other, rendered largely useless, and of course stopping a major thoroughfare for days in terms of anybody being able to get through. And if the images don't give you a sense of the destruction and the loss families have suffered, then this next photograph encapsulates the power of the storm to take away all that people had worked for all of their lives. It's in the faces of the people I met. Here in Pleasantville, New Jersey, which is right outside Atlantic City, along a section there, the mayor of Pleasantville took me to meet a series of residents whose homes had been ripped apart. So I'm standing outside of the person's home, almost as if it was a dollhouse looking in. And I would love to have said that this poor gentleman, that it was only him, but it was an entire community of homes whose homes had been ripped apart, and you could see into their homes. And it shows the nature of the breadth and scope of the devastation. It's not that he lost his shingle, it's that he lost the whole side of his home, now exposed to the elements, and of course everything ripped apart. The other thing about this picture, in addition to the incredible destruction, is the resiliency. When I went to share my sentiments and my concern with this gentleman, he asked me, "How are you doing, Senator?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's more important, how are you doing?" He says, "I'm doing fine. I'm here, I'm alive, and I still got part of my home." So sometimes when we think about how difficult our lives might be at any given moment, I think about this gentleman and the extraordinary resiliency he had in the midst of probably one of the most difficult times in his life. And so many other New Jerseyans who I met like that. I met a young woman in Hoboken whose entire basement apartment was flooded, totally gone. lost everything that she had worked for in her young professional life. And in the midst of that tragedy for her, she was at a shelter, running the shelter, helping everybody else who had been displaced, some not as badly as her, not thinking about her tomorrow, but thinking about her fellow citizens in Hoboken, New Jersey. I met some poor families who were not badly affected by the storm, who opened up their homes and their kitchen table to individuals who were their neighbors who were hurt very badly. And even though they didn't have a lot to put around the kitchen table, they were sharing what they had. So I saw citizens risk their own lives to save their neighbors' lives in the rushing water and heard their accounts. And so I saw the better angels of people in the midst of the storm. The fact is, Mr. President, that despite the damage and the displacement, the human suffering and the loss of property, possessions, personal photographs, family memories, the people of New Jersey held together. Neighbors came together to help one another. As much as they were shaken and mourned their own loss, they worked together to help each other, to save each other, to begin the recovery, to get New Jersey back on its feet, and federal and state and local governments were there to help. The federal response was quick and it was effective, but there is still so much more that we need to do, and still more that we can do to help those families who are still without shelter, still without a place to return to call home, and without a clear picture of what the future holds. The storm was unprecedented in the breadth of its devastation, and while our shoreline was hard hit, that doesn't begin to describe the full impact. Some of our nation's most densely populated communities were also hit very hard, requiring one of the biggest rescue and recovery efforts we've seen. A response that size obviously takes time, but we acted quickly and will continue to do what needs to be done. After surveying Sandy's damage with President Obama and Governor Christie on October the 31st, Senator Lautenberg and I called for increased support from the federal government to deal with the cost of response efforts. In a letter to the President, we asked that the federal share for disaster response be increased from the standard 75% to a much higher, possibly 100%, because of the devastating impact of what meteorologists have called a perfect storm. The President initially issued a disaster declaration for 8 New Jersey counties, and along with Senator Lautenberg, we requested additional counties be included, and they were. Before walking with the President and the Governor through Brigantine, New Jersey, I had the opportunity to tour the destruction in Pleasantville, in Hoboken, in Jersey City, in communities in Bergen County, and what I saw was unlike anything I've ever seen in my lifetime in those communities. I'm very grateful that the President came to New Jersey with the full force of the federal government to see and respond firsthand to the devastation the hurricane left in its wake. I have proudly lived in New Jersey all of my life, and seeing the Garden State in ruin was heartbreaking. The shore of my youth is gone. Much of it lies in the ocean for ages. But it made me realize that in times of tragedy, in times of storms like Sandy, we need government at all levels to come together, all of us rolling up our sleeves to help our neighbors recover and rebuild and reclaim their lives. We need to make certain that we secure all of the resources necessary to help New Jersey and every community affected by this horrible storm to rebuild and emerge stronger than before. Since the storm, I have requested emergency funding for New Jersey's transportation network, highways, rail lines, ports, and airports that were devastated by the storm. I asked the President and Secretary LaHood for emergency funds to repair highways and bridges and to expedite assistance to all impacted modes of transportation. I called on the President to dispatch emergency fuel and power supplies to New Jersey to ease the fuel shortage and to keep emergency vehicles running in the immediate aftermath of the storm. And to ensure critical infrastructure, water treatment, and sanitation facilities, we received the help of the Army Corps of Engineers to have these facilities remain operable. And the federal government also responded with $10 million in emergency funding for some of those critical transportation needs, freed up 2 million gallons of fuel from the Northeast Oil Reserve, and the EPA took action that rerouted this fuel to New Jersey when it needed it the most. The federal response also included a grant for New Jersey to hire 1,000 workers to help communities clean up from the storm. But despite all of that, many families in my state are still suffering. They've lost much, and many are displaced, some permanently from their homes. That's why I've called for the immediate suspension of foreclosures and evictions for all New Jersey homeowners who faced financial difficulties before the storm and now are suffering additional difficulties in the wake of it, and for swift action to expand emergency mortgage payment relief to all New Jersey homeowners who have lost income as a result of Hurricane Sandy. And that's why we must work to give them certainty of what the federal government will do to help them rebuild their lives so they can make critical decisions as to their futures. Mr. President, what I take away from this experience is the fact that we are all in this together, one community, each of us dependent on the other, each of us working to rebuild and recover for the benefit of all of us in New Jersey, but I believe of us, all of us in the country. That's what community is all about. It's the heart of our motto, Et pluribus unum, from many one. We have just gone through an election at the heart of which we debated the role of government in our lives. And I would submit we need to focus on what government does to rebuild the spirit of community that we have seen in action in the aftermath of this devastating storm. Americans across the country were riveted by the stories of the immediate aftermath of the storm. Pictures of communities underwater, homes moved blocks down the road, homes and trains blocking federal highways, hospitals closed, gas lines miles long, people waiting hours for fuel to run generators and keep their homes heated, weeks of fuel rationing, and no transit or Amtrak service for the entire region for people to get to work or visit their families. Without a doubt, those have been trying times for New Jersey. But now, just because those scenes may no longer be showing in living rooms across the country, doesn't mean that the recovery is over. Thousands of families are still displaced from their homes and will be for months to come. Transit lines are still out. Community infrastructure still has to be rebuilt. Now is not the time for the federal government to walk away. It's more crucial now than ever for the federal government to help devastated communities rebuild, to help families get the assistance they need to repair their homes and put their lives back together. And I, for one, will not rest until the rebuilding is done. This is one country, the United States of America. That's why when there was destruction in New Orleans with Katrina, in Florida, in Joplin, Missouri, or crop destruction in the Midwest, I came along with other colleagues to support those communities. I viewed it as my time to stand with my fellow Americans in distress. And now it's time for my fellow Americans to stand with New Jersey. New Jersey has been battered, but we are not broken. We're stronger and more united in our efforts to work together to recover, rebuild, and recommit ourselves to uniting around our common concerns and shared values, rather than divided by our differences. That's the lesson we learned. And together, we will rebuild, and the Garden State will bloom once again. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and observe the absence of a quorum.